Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's really a pleasure to have this panel with you. So maybe you would like to introduce yourselves. Maybe ladies first, please.
Hi, I'm Lena Marcinowska. I'm a lawyer in Partyński & Partners.
Hello, I'm Aleksandra Kucma-Kurska and I'm a lawyer at Hogan Lovells.
Thank you, Kamila. My name is Michał Pękała. I'm head of video games law at Linklaters Warsaw. Welcome, all of you guys.
Hello, one more time. So, as I told you, I would like to talk to you about most unfair or tricky terms and conditions that you have seen in your years of practice in Polish game dev. And hopefully, starting at the beginning, game dev walks into the bar, this is the joke. But when game developer comes to you and he has in his hands articles of association that he's about to sign with another investor or any other third party that is more powerful and more experienced. Have you ever noticed something unusual, something that make your red light goes on and said, what? I think we should, talk about it and negotiate it. Please, someone.
So I can only say that I have never seen any term sheet or article of association that I did not have any comments to in my entire career. Yeah, partially probably because I'm just coming from the lawyer's perspective, but on the other hand, it's just the documents I see. They always need some twisting, especially if there is an indie developer or it's just a developer that just wants to make his first step in the business and he's being approached by a senior investor, someone who has years of experience in doing business, not necessarily in video games business. The difference in the approach is enormous. So the perspective of this small developer, to receive any sort of document that's supposed to be like the basis for the actual document, the agreement between the parties, is always full of traps, and not necessarily because of the devious approach of the investor itself, but because of the lack of experience and practical knowledge of the developer itself. And but by way of example, the most common issue is that young developer is saying to me, Michael, we just got this tremendous offer. They're giving us $2 million. Just please take a look and return to me in 15 minutes saying that this is okay, so we can move forward to the investment agreement. And I'm like, okay, hold your horses, give me at least an hour. And when I start reading this term sheet or the letter of intent, I can see that there is a lot of power put in the hands of the investor in terms of appointing the management board, the advisory board itself, full of personal rights associated with the investor, to be able to at any time appoint a new member board or to revoke the existing management board. The examples are so plenty that we could speak for like an hour or so, but
2 votes per share. That's normal.
Yeah, the guarantee held back from the investment at any time from the perspective of the investor.
But have you noticed that's my conclusion, that I think in last year, maybe year and a half, most of these tricky parts, as far as they can be, they were moved from articles of association to additional investment agreement. So that's what I saw. I think it was everything was in the articles of association. I was the one that was saying, no, please don't do it, because every single change will have to go to the court.
There is very simple answer to that, because the article of associations are often read by the notary itself.
Maybe
the notaries in Poland, they started to highlighting these red flags for developers. So the investors decided to move all of these aspects to the sidebar, to the investment agreement, which is not a point which is not governed by the notary itself. It's just the agreement.
That's true. I didn't think about that because I really had good luck with my two notaries that I'm working with, and they always, for the last 7 years, always they were, pointing that.
I have to say that a part of the blame is on me because I advised that approach to some of the investors in Poland.
Okay, me too. To be honest, me too. But
so apologies.
But still.
Yeah. Guys, do you because I want to add something which could be controversial, because I wanted to say that there are no unfair contracts or agreement or clauses. There are only contracts that have not been read or checked. And I absolutely agree with Michal that the first issue is that people give too much power to investor, and that if you've got a company, this power is usually given in shares. If you do not have a company, this power is given in IP that the developer usually, not usually, but sometimes transfer to investor, and that could be a trap.
If you put it that way, I must say that this is true, especially when some, let's say, more powerful party, it doesn't have to be an investor, it can be a publisher, someone else, he's acting like a good uncle, and everything is okay, you don't need a lawyer. Do you know how often I've heard that my developer said to me that they said that they don't need a lawyer because everything is okay?
It's a standard agreement.
Yeah, but to be honest, I was one on the other side, but the policy was that I was sitting with the developer and going step by step through whole agreement, through every term and condition, and still there were some not very pleasant situation, because even though I told them what does that mean, that maybe they should go to their lawyer, because still I'm representing the other side, but this was my obligation to talk them through this agreement. After they went to their lawyer, they were like, what? And I was like, come on, I told you what that mean. Plus you negotiated this, because usually that was some business stuff, not even the lawyer part, but the strict business part. And you agreed upon that. So don't blame me. I'm the messenger. I'm doing my work, but lovely work.
I guess we can safely say that if there is one takeaway from this exchange of thoughts so far for developers, would be to say that there is no such thing as a beneficial approach from the perspective of investor, publisher, of any party that has the money. So always the party that's coming with loads of money for developer has some agenda.
That's true.
And of course, rarely there are very honest investors that just believe in the project and want to participate. But this is less than 10% of all the projects that I have approached.
I had one question a few days ago from a small developer. They asked me, because they are in a process of pitching their project to a few investors. They asked me, is it always that within creating the company and within the articles of association, there is this additional investors agreement? I said that in my opinion, this is a common practice, almost regular, because to be honest, in the last 2 years, I didn't have one situation when I wouldn't have this type of additional investors agreement. How is it from your perspective? I think it's normal practice right now. Yeah.
It is a normal practice, and like stepping into the shoes of the investor itself. I could not imagine myself being an investor and not having the investment agreement, for the very, very simple reason that the articles of associations are the public knowledge. Everyone can go to KRS and read the agreements, the articles of association. So if I am the investor, I don't want to share with the general public how I approach this particular investment, what tranches of the money would be from me, and what rights do I like to adhere to myself with respect to the entire project. Everything that it's supposed to be covered by the project itself, and not necessarily the legal stuff of the company, I would always put in the side agreement.
I agree, totally. So let's make a few steps ahead. So now we have this fictional game dev studio, and we have contractors, because as we all know, 95% of the game dev industry works upon B2B contracts or work agreement. There is the minimum employment contract in the area. So what here? Because in my perspective, in my opinion, in my experience, the biggest problem, as always, IP law in general. This is something and the most common questions, but do we need to put those field of exploitation? This is whole page. This now has the 5 pages. I wanted only 3. And
I can cheer you up that a few days ago I've got an agreement with a contractor in which there were 2 things: license and assignment of rights, and both they were for the same IP, and in none of them that there were no any fields of exploitation. So this is even.
But you think that was the copy paste mistake, or someone just changed?
I have no idea what was the intention. It's a real example, so really it happens.
I wonder which mechanism trumps the other one in this agreement.
Yeah, because to be honest, I don't really like Polish Act on IP laws in general. Sorry, I don't want to say the whole long name. I don't like to read it. I don't think it's very intuitive, especially since during my last exam during college, I was arguing with my teacher that I won't ever have anything in common with IP laws. So please, can we just stop? However, and a lot of developers is asking me, can we write it somehow different, some normal language? I'm like, no.
Or make it shorter, right?
Make it shorter is always. It's like, come on, 3 pages. I'm like, yeah, but half of the first page is, introduction and who know who. Plus, have you noticed? But that was the last thing I had last week, I think. And that was from a professional party. Mistakes in introduction of the parties. So no share capital within public companies. This small, very basic mistakes.
It's typical, Kamila. It happens all the time. And it's not, like you said, the professional party. I've seen big companies that they can't manage their own representation, and I can see people that they do not appear in the National Register of Companies. They don't have power of attorney itself. They just write the agreements and issue them, and they do the contract.
Once I had a person that stated that she was, or he, I think, attorney at law, and I was like, I don't think so. I don't think you are, but it was okay for them. I graduated from law school, so I'm attorney at law. And it's like, no, you are not. You can have a lot of trouble with that. But that was the digression. We have one question about our previous subject. Is it safer to open a new LLC for every project, as Hollywood economy do, and maybe be in debt for life? At least I will lose just one IP, not all of them. This is business strategy, in my opinion. On one hand, I think if you don't believe in your project, if you cannot cover or just protect some part of expenses that you will have in the first 1 or 2 years, then you should probably think whether it's crucial and necessary and even good for you to start your own company. On the other hand, I do understand that from the investor perspective of view, it's easier and more secure for those investors and publishers to work with another company that has vested all IPs within them than to go to some person and, in the worst case scenario, took their home or car or backpack or whatever it is.
I would also add that this question that Oleg stated, it's actually a very good topic for the separate conversation itself. No, really, because of there are pluses and upsides and downsides of this approach, and it's really difficult to say what approach is better. But I would say that from perspective of indie developer, having a separate LLC for every project, I would see from perspective of investors some kind of shady moves, because if I want to step into the business and mark myself in the industry and then gather some renown for myself, I would rather stick to one name and one company and prove with my track record that I can actually do something. But if I open new companies for different projects without any credit history of me being a good developer before that, I don't know. I would be very suspicious to that approach. But on the other hand, we have one of the biggest Polish company group that they have like 50 plus LLC for different projects, and they do just fine. But they're just like one example in the entire market.
Yeah, I think it's one example plus years of experience, because they are running this since, and it wasn't like at one spot they opened 24 new companies. It was like process through last year. However, I also had once this talk with my developer that the question was almost the same, whether they should start another subsidiary company or something like that for another project, even though their first project went very good and the company was existing and was financially secure. And I said that, just like what you said, that I don't think it will be very good, and it won't be looking very well for an investor, for creditors, for banks, etc. Plus, if they are really so much afraid about the income if they do this new project under the same company, I told them to get D&O insurance, directors and officers. And as long as I think they don't want to commit a crime, so it's not intentionally, and it's not a crime, it's just some wrongful misconduct or negligence because they were unaware or something like that, they can protect themselves if they are really afraid because of these responsibilities if something will go wrong.
Yeah. But also in the at the bottom of the Oleg's question is that I think he's a little bit afraid of the possibility of losing the IP. And it's not that easy actually to lose the IP as a company unless you sign off on a really, really bad agreement. So to avoid situation where you lose IP, it's not the approach to open new LLCs every time, but to just have good agreements with your partner.
Plus, maybe his question relates to the fact that if something goes wrong, you are about to close your company. And believe me, dear developers, closing a company in Poland, it's not that simple and easy and quick and fast process. As far as I can tell, this is a long way ahead of us, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you will lose your IP. Still.
Yes.
So that's
also at the same time, one day before the liquidation process starts, you can just transfer the IP to the other company. So
exactly. So coming back to our last subject, contractors, B2B, IP loss and other traps.
Yeah, so Camila, I think that to give some clear answer or just position to people who listen to us, I think that we need to when we write those agreements and fields of exploitation, we need to stick to Copyright Act. For example, what I don't like in agreements, and I sometimes it sometimes happens, those fields of exploitation that are written in the way for the purpose of doing something, for the purpose of advertising something, and there is no this list from the Copyright Act. I don't like it. I think that it mixed everything, so I always propose to stick to that.
I usually give just those fields from the Act, and if they really want, or I think it's necessary, I just add something more, because there was a situation when was needed for holographic reasons, because maybe someday, and they wanted to work on that. So I wasn't sure. I knew it will be within the modification of the work, but still, I just prefer to put it like an additional point, because why not? It doesn't hurt anyone as long as you have this what is stated in the Act. So, yeah.
I think that it should be said that if you order some work from external contractors, you need to secure IP, of course, also derivative works and all those other things. But I also want to emphasize another thing, which is not related with IP. It's related with labor law, and sometimes it also happens because sometimes these contracts are constructed in the way that, let's say, could be deemed to be employment contracts. Sometimes it's important not to use some phrases that is really dedicated for employment contract. For example, if you deal with a contractor under civil contract, you should not use instructions or job duties or annual leave. you should not give him instruction, but rather say what is his role, because this could lead to some risk related with being sued, having inspection of, I don't know how do you call it, ZUS,
Social Security Agency or something like that.
Yes,
that's true.
Or you can call it the king.
No, kidding. I love them.
So let me just add that I completely agree with everything you just said, and with respect to the Polish Copyright Act, it's, well, if we do business in Poland and we are the company incorporated in Poland and we want to hire a contractor who is based in Poland as well, I don't think there is like a point discussing whether this approach to the copyright can be this or other way. We have this act and we have to follow the instructions that was prescribed like 25 years ago. But only with respect to the foreign partners, it is often expected to have something more than just the fields of exploitation that are listed in the act itself, especially when we encounter the partners from US or any other common law country. They are not accustomed to our approach to the fields of exploitation. They have their own fields of use. So only for that purpose, I also tend to expand on the ways of how the works can be used, like staying with the Polish Act itself, but also adding something more, like you said, Kamila, if this is beneficial for the project itself.
And why not?
Because it's often really, it's way easier just put some more wording to the agreement that to explain an attorney from US that this is how we do it in Poland.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. I just that reminded me of something I had at the beginning of this year. I think it was with one of the attorneys from the Netherlands. Oh, that was so hard conversation, and he was like, "But you are talking about IP laws, and this is commercial law. So in what you are specialized?" And I must be somehow in both because in Poland it's related. Yeah. But how? So what? Who is another lawyer working on it? Like, there is no other lawyer. It will be me. I will be doing whole work from the commercial perspective of view, plus a whole IP law, and later on project upon the civil law. And he was like, yeah, but no. So that was brilliant, and that was what you said. The difference is even within EU, they can be huge.
Oh, yeah.
It was very nice.
But especially when it comes to Netherlands, because in Netherlands they have very peculiar Copyright Act, and it's not like anything else we can see in the continental Europe. It's really strange act. I have some experience with this as well myself.
In which language? Just asking, because usually.
Of course, in Flemish.
I do. You are the genius. But okay, now somehow quite flawlessly, let's go further on this subject. If we have this party, especially foreigner party and stuff like that, publishers or investors, however, let's say for the purpose of this conversation, publishers. And this is when the magic begins. So my favorite subject, let's start from the page 1. Problems, troubles, tricky stuff.
On the first page.
Maybe, okay. We can start in the middle, whatever you choose.
Ask any question. It's like a bucket full of pins.
Usually, if someone would tell me, like, please look at this, like, for the half an hour, because I need to know whether it's any reason to negotiate or what I should look out for. So I'm looking at the marketing costs, scope of activities that publisher is about to do, whether it's quite. I wouldn't like to say wide, but whether it's stated that he will do this, and you have this full catalog of activities that publisher will do for you. Second thing is localization. And third thing is remuneration and the ways it will be dealt with it. You will be dealing with it later on. So when the remuneration will be paid, is there a recoup for marketing activities and stuff like that? These are the 3 things that in this half an hour I would probably look out.
In half an hour,
yeah,
nice.
No, if you have this like you said, like 15 minutes and you need 1 hour. So if I have like half an hour and just tell me go, no go, watch out, I would look for this free at this free part of the agreement. Marketing is always a problem for me.
It is a problem with marketing. Let's leaving the recoupment of marketing activities like for a second, but with respect to marketing, what it's very common from coming from the publisher's perspective is to just put a sentence, we will provide marketing, period.
Exactly.
And by saying that we will provide marketing, it means that I will put 2 posts on Facebook and this is done. I just provided marketing. Like this is like in every single publishing agreement, especially when it comes to mobile games.
Okay, so the solution that you use is the solution is to do a list. What is approved?
Well, it depends. It depends on the project. The bigger the project is, the more details I tend to put in the agreement or the attachment itself. But with respect to smaller projects, I at least try to come up with some kind of a budget that will be secured by publisher, and the things like general directions which should be covered by the publisher itself, plus all of the activities itself should be discussed between the parties and agreed upon before they are moved by initiated by the publisher itself. To try not to because on the other hand, it is really easy to stop the talks on the publishing agreement and just put yourself in 3 months conversations about the marketing strategy, which may not be the most important factor at the time the developer wants to have the publisher itself. Because from the perspective of publisher itself, they may not know the answer to all the questions at the time of negotiating of the agreement when the game is not finished yet, for instance. And the golden status will be only reached in like 10 months ahead of the assignment of the agreement. So the fixed strategy is not that important at this time. But the directions how to approach that strategy should be in the agreement.
So I have a little bit different approach because usually I came up with the more detailed list. Depends on whether I have this recoup signed later on or not. If there is a recoup, the thing that is a must-have for me is the limit of the marketing costs, and because of this limit, I intend to put some kind of a list, or at least a general direction for this list, like you said, without special details. However, it would be nice to know that, for example, there will be some conferences that the publisher will provide the developer with a booth and will cover costs for traveling, for example, for 1 or 2 developers and stuff like that. If there is no such recoup, then it's like you said, it depends on the stage of the project. That's my perspective. But with the marketing, there is always the biggest problems are with marketing, in my opinion. So usually I also add a possibility of an audit, financial audit, once a year. I think I saw that this became in last 2 years quite a common practice. So even medium and bigger publishers are putting this in the first draft of the contract, that you have the right to make a financial audit, but you need to, for example, choose some good, let's say, company without special indication which company it will be what, but with good opinion and stuff like that. And if they will find some mistake, then something.
And that's the very common trap. When it's put in the agreement, because coming from advising the publisher itself and talking with small developer, I'm saying you have a right to perform an audit once a year, but it has to be run by the reputable auditor, and it only can come from the big four.
This is.
And being a small developer, try to hire Deloitte or KPMG to
That's
run
I think I know what agreement you were talking about. I told my developer that no, please don't be mad at me. You cannot afford to do that. But usually within the cost of this audit, I said that it should depend on what came out after this audit. If there is some huge mistakes, doesn't matter, then they should cover the costs. If not, of
Correct.
course.
Let's say like the threshold. Let's say if the difference is like 10% or
usually
more,
this is
the publisher covers the cost of the audit.
Yeah, so I'm doing the same. Okay, we have another question. Sorry if my question is stupid. No questions are stupid. But I'm fairly new to the contracting. Do I need a lawyer specializing in the game industry to verify my contract, or will a general lawyer be able to verify my contract with a gaming publisher? Maybe I want to talk about this, please.
I can answer. There are two answers. Any good lawyer can verify a contract from the civil law perspective, and then such lawyer will help you with all the legal traps that would be put in the agreement itself. It would be preferable if that lawyer also have knowledge in the fields of IP law, not just the civil law itself, to make sure that you do not give away your kidney along with your agreement. But frankly speaking, and not to advertise ourselves here, if you do not ask for help, either a lawyer or somebody else from the video game industry, you will not see the missing spots in terms of the business approach and what the actions and obligations of the publisher and yourself supposed to be put in the agreement. And although the agreement can be good from the legal perspective, you may be missing some very major parts of the contract itself that's supposed to be covered. Like already discussed, the marketing itself. This is a good example.
I think that it's universal rule, I would say. If you want to have, for example, good drag along clause or tag along clause, you also need to have a good, lawyer who specializes at those issues, and it works in any business, in any sector.
I usually has one argument that this is also something that happened to me. A developer had his own lawyer. What I must say, it was Miss. She was a very good IP lawyer. It was incredible. I still have somewhere this agreement because this is like the golden mark for me. However, they of course trusted her because why not? And she put it in an agreement which they didn't read, that they will deliver Gold Master of the game without any bugs. And
good luck with that.
For her, that was like, okay, they will give very good, perfect work of art, let's say, and it will be okay. When I saw this, I was like, okay, can I tell them that I know that this is for our benefit? That was for our benefit, like in 1,000,000% because I was on the publisher part. But I was like, please. And they were like, oh, okay, tell them. So we told them, and they finished the cooperation with the lawyer. However, I told them very frankly that she was really, I was impressed about her knowledge and the style of writing this agreement in the scope of the IP laws. That was perfect. But with this, so yeah, like Michał and like Lena said, it's always better to have someone who is a little bit specialized, even a little bit. The more the better. But on terms have or not have at all, better general lawyer than any at all.
Yeah. You know what? I do not agree, because really some of negotiations that I conducted, not maybe not in game dev, but in any sector, sometimes they are really ruined by lawyers who are not specialized. Really,
yeah. Because I agree with you in 100%. That's true. But
let's say that if there is a choice to be made, that you can either use a lawyer who's not specialized in the video game industry or not use a lawyer at all, let's go with the first approach.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, but I didn't thought about what Lena said. That that's true. I had a few times those extra calls with lawyer, but it's okay. I also think it's valuable, and it's saying a lot of good about the lawyer if he's asking. Because there's nothing worse if he thinks that he knows everything or she knows everything and it's perfect. But yeah, that's true. That's true.
This also goes to the psychic of the lawyers themselves, because unfortunately a lot of our colleagues from our sector, they they are not very keen to admit that they do not understand the substance of the contract. So they like to stick to the legal language without sometimes going delve into the, what's this release candidate? It's probably not something important. So let's like just leave it like that. Because I don't want to fool myself, like look stupid.
So I have a question a little bit related to it. If you have this type of publishing contract and you have appendixes, a lot of appendixes, and let's go, for example, to the milestone appendix. Do you look at it? And if you look at it, yeah,
always.
But not everyone, I know.
Always.
But when you do,
always.
What is the most important thing you are looking at? First thing.
The structure of the milestone appendix itself, to make sure that it actually outlines how all the milestones supposed to be delivered by the developer versus how the delivery process is outlined in the agreement. Because the attachment itself is one thing. You will have like the short descriptions or longer descriptions of the milestones, probably associated with the dates when they're supposed to be delivered. But this is not the major part. The most important part is how the agreement says about how the publisher or any other investor would actually accept milestones themselves, and what happens if there are bugs or something else is missing in the milestone. And this part of the agreement is, I've never seen a publishing agreement where the acceptance mechanism was correctly put in the agreement from the very beginning, unless this is the agreement coming from the experience, not
exactly. So that was my agreement that had everything like tip top and top notch. But I knew that they are very good. So that was very light and very very nice agreement to it. But I also look on the range of the milestone, because sometimes they are either under-described, if I may imagine this type of word, or over-described. So there is so much detail that there is no possibility for the developer to create, to do something just a little bit different, especially within the graphics or concept arts or something like that. Or on the other hand, there are so not very well described that you are not sure what you are supposed to be delivering within this milestone, which opens the way for the publisher to say no for the millions and tens millions of time.
True, but at the same time, at least half of the DevPub agreements are structured in a way where, when two parties decide to, one party decides to invest in a game and the other decides to accept the money and create the game itself, they do not know how the game's supposed to look at that time. True. So they only stick themselves with this general description of the milestones, and they only invent the game and think about those milestones on the way.
Okay.
This is half of the projects. The other half of the projects have the milestones schedule, which outlines the general approach and description of the milestones itself, but also additional appendix is used in the agreement, the description of the milestones. And this is where you put all the details that you just discussed.
Exactly, I agree with that 100%. But what goes with the milestone are also the date of the delivery, as you said. And did you notice, because this is very common in agreements that I am looking at, that the developers, maybe they are not overestimating their their abilities to work on it, but they don't consider, let's say, act of gods, or even the fact that 5 out of 7 people in the game dev studio has small children, and these children will go to the kindergarten and they will bring stomach flu, which in my experience once it made whole studio sick for 1 month, which they didn't consider, because so I'm usually telling them, you should give yourself like 10% of the time extra. So give yourself 30, you will start to negotiate, you will end up with 15 or 20, and you will be safe. If you finish this earlier, it will be okay, but you with broken hand won't be sitting, in the, I don't know, hospital waiting room with computer.
That's true. I would also add the overestimation of their own skills when it goes to developer itself. But at the same time, I honestly, I maybe encountered this like once or twice, where if this situation, like you described, that the entire studio like was locked down because everyone got sick. Well, publishers, they usually tend to understand the situation, and they do not involve the rights.
Exactly. You need to be honest with the publisher. This is the first rule.
This is like the video game market is still remaining one of the few where the people.
Yes, and they're going on gentleman's agreement. That is true. But I'm always telling my developers that because they are sometimes afraid to put those type of extra points to negotiate, that remember that the agreement is for the bad times, for times of war. If everything will be okay, if you trust each other, if those gentleman agreements will go on and you will be able to cooperate with each other, that there will be no need of use. But if there will be, you need to assume that you just, finished with every possible way of talking to each other, and now you are on the warpath, and you need to somehow fight for your rights. I went with the song.
That's correct.
Yeah. I think that talking about this this time of war, it's important to say about the thing that sometimes is omitted totally, termination of the contract. And the common maybe not the common practice, but sometimes I saw, of course, asymmetrical provisions that only one side can unilaterally terminate the agreement. So you cannot agree for that, of course. The developer should have a right to terminate an agreement and specific situations when it should happen, and of course also apart from that have an exit plan. What happens with IP, what happens with revenue, and other things. So
I think it's quite important, especially considering what we said earlier, that people want shorter agreements, less words, less pages. But I said a few times my developers that Polish IP law is constructed this way that if you don't put some provisions into the agreement, you need to go straight to the act, and it won't be favorable to you. For example, if you're a publisher, of course, other way around, if you are a developer, and this is from their perspective doing, but especially, with those licensing agreements over 5 years with no time and procedure of termination and stuff like that, they are usually, especially foreign publishers, that are surprised that we have authors secured that much within this one act. They are not aware of that. This is something I think uncommon in most of the countries when you have IPs regulated.
It is. But at the same time, when you deal with foreign publishers, well, you very rarely use the Polish law itself. It's not a problem.
So what? But okay. That's true. Usually you have law of UK or some state of United States of America, depends on the, Texas, California, Delaware, doesn't matter. But what with a contractor or subcontractor sorry that I'm jumping back but that just came up to my mind. With subcontractors, foreigners. Because a lot of my small developers are working with freelancers from really all over the world. Usually this is like single or double time agreements for some kind of work, either translation or some assets to the game. And I'm telling them that if you have this position, let's go with the Polish law because you know it, and this is for your benefit, and this is one-time contract.
Of course. You do the same what the publisher from US is doing to you. He's invoking his power to impose the US law, and you as a developer, you impose your right to use the Polish law with respect to your subcontractors. That's not only
because they're like, you are very harsh. I'm not harsh.
But at the same time, it is always recommended to take a look into at least the IP law of the country that the subcontractor is coming from, to make sure that the transfer of IP is actually effective. Have
you ever looked at India and Hindu law? Because to be honest, there is, especially in mobile services, I've come across a lot of agreements with Indian freelancers. And I think I didn't do this agreement because I think they didn't talk later on or something during the negotiations went south, so I didn't go into it. But I know that a lot of developers are working with people from India.
So with respect to India itself, it's fairly simple approach because they tend to rely on at least in majority they use the leftovers of the UK presence in the India itself. So to some extent, like similarly to Hong Kong, for instance, they rely on the approach of the UK law. But at every time, I always, when I deal with international contractors, I always ask my colleagues from that country where the subcontractor is coming from, at least for the advice to make sure that how the structure of the IP transfer, because this is the most important part, is actually in line with the local law itself. And I actually, a week ago, I was doing the exact same with respect to the Indonesian and Thai laws to make sure that the subcontractors are effectively transferring the IP law, even though we put the agreement under the governance of the Polish law.
So
it's always
exactly, that's a valuable tip, and it's good to know it. And we have another question. Considering publishers, is it common to have a contract where the publisher spends a certain amount of budget on marketing for a certain period of time? Example, spending 40K over one first year and then renewing the budget, especially for mobile F2P games. I think
it's very it's not common, especially in the mobile games, because like going through this example, if I as a publisher spend 40K to market the launch of the product, what's the reason to market the same game a year ahead? If it's not selling, there's something wrong with the game itself, or my marketing campaign didn't work. So putting the same money a year in advance, I don't see a benefit to that.
Yeah, I would rather see those money going around publishing date rather than later on. Yeah, I haven't seen something like that, but maybe why not?
Yeah, well, if publisher agrees,
why not?
Let's go with that.
Give us money.
From the perspective of developer, it's a very good approach.
That's why let's go back to the publishers and remuneration. Considering we have this recap and we are very thorough and we had a great lawyer, possibly one of us, but still we have whole marketing under control, we have the scope of the activities, the budget and everything. Do you find any problems with most common terms on the remuneration paid later on?
Problems? Well, there are not that many approaches to how to structure remuneration with respect to the publishing deals. They are usually structured in a way that all the money flow goes through the publisher itself. The publisher takes care of all the costs associated with chargebacks and any type of the community standards and marketing itself. And then the publisher itself retains a portion. The percentage, let's say 20% of the income, and just issue the report to developer like every single 3 months, especially usually. And based on that report, the developer just invoice the publisher.
I usually have a problem with this new definitions that appear in those agreements. What is the net revenue and stuff like that? Because usually there are some extra costs put in there. They are not limited to all necessary costs or withhold taxes that publisher is due to pay. There are some small additional costs just put in the way that developer won't even look at it. But they open the gate, to some misconduct or maybe unfair business behavior, and this is something I have problem with. Those definitions.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, yes, they are the cornerstone of the entire remuneration mechanism: the gross revenue versus the net revenue. So like always, like the gross revenue is everything that comes on the account of publisher. And the definition of the net revenue
is because if you will go strictly with the dictionary of the with the act, it will be less any expenses, everything. But why you should be paying for the I don't know, salary of the publisher employers if they have this in their risk. So you need to remember about that. But this is very, very often a big problem. I do have like 50-50 situation where the percent of the remuneration is changing during the period of time. So at the beginning, especially if there is recoup, at the beginning up until the recoup period, 100% or 90% is going to the publisher, and later on, within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it's changing. But this is like 50-50, not always, not in every agreement, and there is no rule whether this is a big publisher or small publisher, Polish, foreign. What is your experience?
That's true. I would say that, well, of course, if the publisher or an investor puts money into the project, it's logical that they want to recoup themselves. And only after that, they want to share the actual profit with the developer. So this is very understandable and standard approach. But at the same time, I always try to refrain my clients from agreeing on the recoupment until there is a full recoupment on the investments. There is 100% going into the pocket of the publisher. At least 20% of every dollar acquired during the recoupment process should go to the developer itself.
Yeah, this is something that should be like
but really, the developers forgot about that, and I'm like, but you know, if you want to take another project or you want to have some work for hire, you won't have money to live on, and they're like, oh yeah. That's true, and they somehow forget about this. I don't know why. Forget about the story. I don't know why, but I don't know. Maybe this is because of they don't want to negotiate because it's hard and it's not very pleasant for them. Because let's be honest, this is like more cultural way to argue with someone else, but still.
I've got another problem, but it's rather, very general remark that sometimes developers focus too much on numbers and percentage rather than agreement as a whole and definition and all those things that lead to this number.
So what is your point of view, if you are talking about the numbers, what's your point of view on some kind of earlier payment? For example, advance for future income or something like that. I think I saw it's quite common. To be honest, more common with smaller titles and medium publishers. But that's my point of view.
Well, it would only work in the DevUp agreement. Well, most likely, if I have my own financials to create the game itself, I don't need the advance payment from the publisher. And if I receive the advance payment, it usually is associated with some kind of obligation.
On one hand, true, but one of my developers is always telling me that in their experience, if either publisher or distributor gives them an advance, they are usually more eager to fulfill PR and marketing contract because they need this money to go back to them. They are not only risking with the salaries for the people who will be working on PR and marketing, but they gave, let's say, pure cash to them. This is their point of view and I'm like, okay, that's something I didn't think about. This is from their perspective because they had some experience this another way, and they are usually they usually won't sign agreement without.
But Kamila, is it something that this is being like requested from the developer?
Yeah, I was surprised because it wasn't publisher. I think it was distributor. Yeah, it was the distributor, but the distributor came to them and they said that, okay, they are willing to distribute because that wasn't some, main channel of distribution, but they want, it wasn't very, very high advance. So it wasn't like, I don't know, $50,000 or something like that, but still it was, I think, around $10,000 or something like that. And I was surprised because distributor said it's okay. Okay.
Well, I don't see a problem with that. If this is like, if this sums up with the business approach.
I think I think it was nice because it somehow shows you that they believe in your title. Because if you don't believe, you just need something to put and fill up the list because you need 100 titles. And in this case, it's why not? And I have one extra question. It just crossed my mind a little bit in common with publishing or distributing agreements. Do you have any kind of experience with cloud gaming and like gaming per hour, something like like Netflix but for gaming? Because I know that in some publishing agreements, those types of conditions are added, that they will have possibility to put your game to any services that provide. Oh my God, game for hour. I forgot how do you call it? Games as a service. Exactly. Thank you. And do you have any experience with this? It's more common. Yeah, I had this also.
I would go even further.
Yeah.
I would say this is the future. This is the future of gaming, and the gas model will be more and more accustomed. While at the same time, it's not that often recognizable in Poland yet. We usually are more inclined with the traditional business model when we create a game and put it on the Steam or any other platform to create the revenue. To invest in the gas model, from developer, you need experience, you need a platform, you need a very good business model of the game itself, how to monetize the game. But coming from the publisher itself, you also need a fairly good experience, knowledge, and in how to approach such projects. But there are a few in Poland.
Yeah, I know.
Emerging.
And usually, within these terms, I expect somehow that there will be clear statement on how you will gain your share afterwards, because a few times I saw this type of terms and they were like in general. For example, you will get like 50%. I know it wasn't 50%, but this is just for the purpose of this conversation. Like you will get like this half of the money, every third month. And so no, usually I expect to have thorough mathematic formula for this, how it will be, how they will be counting it, how they will pay you later on, in which term.
And it's not that different from the typical publishing agreements. You also have usually the percentage that it's split between publisher and developer, but the difference goes to the definition of net profits, net revenue. There are additional costs that are covered by publisher, for instance, with respect to servers and maintenance of the users themselves. So this is what fluctuates from one month to another. And it's also taken into account by publisher in terms of how much costs will be associated, because from the perspective of the gas game, the more users you have, the more costs you bear each month. So this is why these additional mechanisms are included in the agreement, to sometimes split the cost of covering the cost of servers between developer and publisher. But this is not that difficult. Once you understand how the technical process goes, it's not that difficult. And as you said,
I agree that this probably is the future, because
it is. And it's not coming from you. It's not coming from me. It's coming from way wiser people that I talk to.
Thank you very much. Our time is up, almost perfect. 7:59. So thank you very much for staying this late on. Hopefully our listeners liked it, and we will see sometimes, hopefully during another conference or maybe next Digital Dragons. So thank you.
Hopefully in person,
because
this time.
I remember.
You remember.
No problem.
Thank you for having us, Camila. You're a great host.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.